So hello everyone and welcome to my guide to Highlord Kruul for Guardian Druids. Now I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I think there's still a lot of people trying to get this appearance, so now that I'm finally done with it, I managed to finish it earlier today, I thought I might as well make a guide to give people some tips and tricks and show them how I did it so they can try it too. Also, if you don't care about the talents or the gear or anything like that, there will be some timestamps in the description, so you can either skip to the talents, to the gear, to phase 1 or phase 2. So let's start off with the talents. On the first row, I'm using Brambles, which gives you a little bit of extra mitigation, which is nice, but it also gives you some reflective damage, which is good for the horrors, and it does even more damage when you use Bark Skin, and this is really cool, especially if you're doing this at lower gear levels like me. I did this at 899 for the second phase, because you're gonna need all the damage you can get. On the second row, I'm using Wild Charge because no matter how good you get at this, you will get knocked off by the Infernals every now and then. So it's just nice to have Charge so you can charge back on. On the third row, I'm using Balance Affinity, which is by far the best affinity you can get here because first of all, you can start the fight in phase 1 in Moonkin form and stand out of the range of the Death and Decay effect and do a lot of damage before he starts casting his first Drain Life. And second of all, it gives you more range on your bear abilities as well. So if you have Lufa, you can hit the boss with trash outside of the range of the D&D, and it makes it much easier to deal with both the Eyes and the Nether Horrors because your Moonfire has more range, so you don't have to run around as much to Moonfire the Eyes, and it increases the radius of Incapacitating Roar, so it's much easier to interrupt all the Nether Horrors with it. On the fourth row, I'm using Mighty Bash, which is amazing for phase 2 because you can use it to stun Kruul, which can buy you just enough time to finish the phase, because phase 2 is a massive DPS check. On the fifth row, I'm using Incarnation because, as I've said already, phase 2 is a massive DPS check, so you want to do as much damage as possible before you die from Annihilate. On the sixth row, I have Survival of the Fittest, so I have shorter cooldown on Bark Skin and Survival Instinct. And finally, on the seventh row, I'm using Rend and Tear, so I do more damage and I take less damage from targets affected by trash. Now, since I only play very casually nowadays, my gear isn't optimized at all, and most of it came from either the Relinquished tokens on the Broken Shore or Mythic Plus dungeons. I do have Lufa, which is nice, but probably not for the reason you might think. A lot of people look at this challenge and they go, well, you need Eco Wraith and you need Lufa to reach the boss in phase 1. But the reason I decided to go for Lufa is because it gives me more damage on trash, so the DPS check in phase 2 isn't as horrific as it is without it. 25% extra damage is a lot. Now don't get me wrong, it does make phase 1 far more chill if you have Lufa and you're using Balance Affinity, because you can reach the boss with trash without stepping into the D&D effect. But if I had enough gear to where I wouldn't have to worry about my damage in phase 2, I would rather use a defensive legendary instead. Now, even though I have a lot of other legendaries like Sephozu Secret, Pridas, Eco Wraith, I have the Barkskin Helmet and the Belt, I decided to go with the Crafted Boots instead. And the reason is quite simple. They give you a lot of mobility. It makes it easier to reach all the ads in phase 1, it makes it easier to avoid the Infernals, and most importantly, it allows you to get out of Netherstomp in phase 2 much faster. And finally, I'm using the World Quest Versatility Trinket and Memento of Angerboda, which is a DPS trinket from Maw of Souls. This trinket is really cool because the proc will increase one of your secondary stats by quite a bit. I think it's about 5,000 with this version, and you can have multiple procs at once. And finally, let's check out my Claws of Ursoc because I do have all the traits, so I do have Concordance, which is not that big of a deal. 4,000 versatility is a lot, but the most important one here is Positive Outlook. This is where most of your damage is going to come from. This gives you a 15% chance to trigger extra trash when you use trash, and it can proc off of itself. So you can get like 3, 4, maybe even 5 trashes in a row, and this is what I think allowed me to do this challenge at such low item level. I'm using 3 trash relics. I'm using one good one and then I replaced 2 of my defensive ones with just random trash relics that I found out in the world. So there's the talents, gear and stuff like that. Let's finally talk about the challenge itself. So the consumables I'm using are the Drums of Heroism that you can buy off the auction house, or you can make them if you're a leather worker. I'm using a rune, I'm using the Agility Flask, and I'm also using Bear Tartar, which gives me a speed bonus whenever I kill something. I always start the fight in Moonkin form, and I just use the potion and DPS the boss down until he starts casting his first Drain Life, at which point I jump into bear form, I interrupt him, I pop Incarnation, and I pop Rage of the Sleeper, and I just spam trash while outside the range of the Death and Decay effect near Velen, so I also trash down the first set of Nether Horrors. Once my Rage of the Sleeper runs out, so I lose my knockback immunity, I start focusing down the eye, so I always moonfire them as soon as they spawn so I don't get knocked off. Now, once you kill the first 2 eyes and the second Drain Life cast comes in, you will get your first Infernal, so you want to start moving around. I would recommend you try to delay picking up one of the Velen Orbs for as long as possible and just rotate cooldowns and use Frenzied Regeneration to heal the damage from Mind Rend. However, once you get to about a halfway point in phase 1, you kind of want to stop using your cooldowns because you ideally want to transition into phase 2 with all your cooldowns ready for Kruul. So I always stop using my cooldowns once he's around 30 to 40% health and I start using Velen's Orbs instead. Now the eyes are pretty easy to deal with, you just moonfire them and they die. However, if you use one of the Velen Orbs, it will dispel the moonfire for some reason. So if you moonfire an eye and then you pick up the orb, you will have to moonfire it again. As far as the Infernals are concerned, you don't really have to pay too much attention to them once you learn how they work and what you need to do, which is to run around them, because the shockwave they do is a straight line, so if you just strafe around them instead of running straight towards or away from them, they will never hit you with it. And you will passively cleave them down as you do the encounter, because they spawn in very big with a very wide shockwave, but as the encounter goes on, they will shrink and so will their shockwave and they will take increased damage, so you don't really have to worry about them. They will just die after a while. And finally, probably the best tip I can give you for phase 1 is for the Nether Horrors, because if you hit them with the Capacitating Roar when they are casting Nether Storm, they will cast it again. But if you hit them after they finish the cast and they started channeling it, they will not, so you can completely disable them. They will still melee you and stack the debuff on you, but that's nowhere near as dangerous as the Nether Storm, which can kill you or Velen in seconds. Now, as I've said already, you want to go into phase 2 with all your cooldowns ready, and as you can see, Varys is almost dead. So what I'm going to do is not kill him, I'm just going to stop DPSing him down, and I'm going to wait for Incarnation and Rage of the Sleeper to come back up. And this is something I started doing towards the end, because previously I would try to kill Varys as soon as I wanted, and I was just not able to either survive phase 2 or I just didn't do enough damage because I didn't have Incarnation. And compared to phase 2, phase 1 is pretty chill once you figure out how the mobs work and what you need to do to deal with them. So I just stay in phase 1, I deal with the adds normally, and I wait for my cooldowns to come back up. Now, phase 2 is where a lot of the frustration will come in, because the lower your item level and the less gear you have, the more you will have to rely on good RNG. The most infuriating of which is number 1 Velen, because his orb placement can be really annoying sometimes, and then your positive outlook trait, because you only have a 15% chance to proc extra trash, and if you don't have a lot of gear, you're not gonna do as much damage, and if you don't get a lot of procs, you're just not gonna kill Kruul. And here we are, I transitioned into phase 2, I immediately pop the drums, I pop the potion, I pop Incarnation, I pop Rage of the Sleeper, and I start trashing around like crazy. Now at this point you want to move around as much as you can without going out of the range of your trash, so you can always hit Kruul. This is just so you don't get stuck in the middle of a Nether Storm, which will probably kill you if you're just standing still and you start moving around as he lands on top of you. He will do his first Annihilate, which you can easily survive without any cooldowns, and follow it almost immediately with Twisted Reflection, which you need to interrupt because that will put a debuff on you that will cause Kruul to heal every time he hits you. So if he gets that on you and then hits you once or twice, you might as well just jump off because you're not going to make the DPS check. Now, as the second Annihilate came in, I was a little bit worried, so I popped a Velen Orb, which stunned him. Then I used Mighty Bash to stun him again, and then I used Survival Instinct to barely survive the second Annihilate. Now, the worst thing about this phase is that you are dealing with Kruul while also dodging the Infernals and dealing with the Nether Horrors, because if you just forget about the Nether Horrors and they charge Velen and start AoEing, he's dead in a second and you lose. Here I got a really good stomp because I was already moving and I had the buff from Bear Tartar, so I took almost no damage from it. I'm spamming all my abilities, I'm trying to AoE the Nether Horrors down, I'm mauling Kruul because Maul now does a good amount of damage. Another Twisted Reflection comes in, I interrupt it, and then out of nowhere he decides to stomp again and kills me. Luckily though, he had so little health that the NPCs managed to kill him about a millisecond before the Nether Horrors finished casting. And there it was, I finally finished it. I was shaking like crazy and I was incredibly happy that I never have to do this again, because this challenge is ass. I think this challenge can be a lot of fun if you have more gear around like 910 or maybe 920. But at 900, this challenge is just frustrating because you're just doing more and more pulls and wasting nether shards, hoping to get good RNG in phase 2 so you can actually kill it. I did well over 100 pulls in total. And out of these 100 pulls, I got to second phase about 30 times. And I always did the same thing, and I never killed it because either Velen put the orbs on top of each other, or he put it underneath me, so it went off whether I wanted it or not, or Kruul decided to just stomp me and immediately cast Annihilate, so he would kill me with Annihilate as I was getting out of the stomp, or I just didn't get enough positive outlook procs and I didn't do enough damage, so I either go to the third Annihilate with just about 8 million damage without any cooldowns, or even the fourth Annihilate, which I wasn't able to mitigate and it just one-shot me every single time. So yeah, as I've said, the challenge is probably a lot of fun if you have enough gear to not worry about your DPS in phase 2, but if you don't, you're just gonna have to do pull after pull after pull, and eventually you're just gonna get good RNG and kill it. But anyway, I hope this video helped you at least a little bit. I thank you very much for watching, and I will see you some other time. Bye-bye.